Lechi lach to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha to a place you do not know. Lechi lach on your journey I will bless.
91st episode of Julia's Miracles. Ohio gozaimasu. V. Gates and whoever else is abroad to visit us today, you're all welcome. And we have just one quick message to say, that is, I hope nobody hurt themselves on Thursday because we didn't have a session. And I just want to make sure people didn't stress out too much, not being able to participate on Thursdays on 2 o'clock. We feel for you, but that's where it was. That was the first break we've taken in about 9 months. Well earned by Julia. I would like to take a second to just mention the Mount Meron tragedy that took place. We all feel terrible about what occurred. It is a miserable situation for everybody, and I'm sure we all feel all the same way about it. I'd like to welcome Sharona, and I'm going to ask Julia to do the introduction. Thanks for joining us today, folks.
So, hi everybody. It's so good to see you again. And yes, I was thinking about you last Thursday, but I was celebrating a friend's birthday. Actually, Sharona was exactly the same place. We were celebrating together a birthday of our common friend. And this is where we heard about what occurred in Meron. So we will not go too deep into it, but this is something which really affects, I would say, our lives, even if you're not Orthodox. This is something you cannot not think about. I even thought of maybe we should go there again, just to talk about Tzfat and the significance of Meron and what happened. But let's see. Hey, Neely, I didn't see you for ages. So I would like to introduce Sharona. Actually, you know her. She already made a few presentations for us, and I'm very privileged to listen to her because, as I told you before, we went together to Tell Lachish to make the photos, and I'm sure that she will do a much better job of telling you about this place comparing to myself. So even though I've been there, I'm looking forward to listening to her. And then I would like to remind that the day after tomorrow, Thursday, we will be going to Jerusalem, and we will be following the footsteps of Jesus. But it will be not just, something every Christian tourist will do, but we will be focusing on the Passion, the week of the Passion, the last week of Jesus' life in Jerusalem. And we will be talking about what happened then, what happens now every year on this special week. Now, actually, these are two special weeks, one for the Catholics and the other one is for the Greek Orthodox. And then we have processions and we have events and we have a divine line which occurs in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And we will be, I went there to see as close as I could, and I will be sharing it with you this coming Thursday. So the whole thing actually happened Saturday. And so these are very fresh news, and I'm sure you will see some some things, some processions, some fires, which you probably never saw before in Jerusalem, and you probably never heard of this tradition of the divine light. So anyhow, that's going to be this Thursday. And in the end of the presentation, I will tell you what you should expect next week. So Sharona, thank you so much for joining us. I know how terribly busy you are those days. Thank you for taking the time, and it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's share the screen. Okay. Okay, so when we look at the Bible and we look at biblical sites in Israel, and in many times you cannot see the story in the place. There's nothing left. Those of you who've been to archaeological digs, you know that from Bronze and Iron Age, you see, if you're lucky, piles of stones. the sites that have to do with the biblical stories outside of Jerusalem, in many cases, are off the beaten track. They're not Caesarea, they're not Banyas, and they don't have the mosaics, they're not Sipoli, they're not Roman period. You have to have a lot of imagination. And Lachish is one of these places. You have to have a lot of imagination. But the uniqueness of Lachish, in order to know that a biblical story is also history and not only faith, if you take the Bible as it is and you believe in every word that's written there, so you don't have a problem. If you come into more scientific view and you're looking for proof, you need to cross-reference. You need to have other sources telling you the same story, just like in journalism. So you have to have aid from archaeology and hopefully from historical sources. And one of the places in Israel where all three come together is at Lachish. And all views, all storytellers of the same story actually come together. So let's see one more step. Okay, talking about the difference between what we actually see in our eyes and the significance we give to the place. Finn was the ambassador or the consul of Britain in Israel or in Palestine, in Ottoman Palestine, in the 19th century. And he wrote this book about stirring times. And one of the passages of this book, okay, in this way, the literature and antiquity of the Holy Land are inseparable from religion, unless by force of unnatural and perceptible violence. Without the Bible, Jordan is but a stream unfit for navigation. Tavo is a round-topped hill of so many ascended feet in height, and Bethlehem but a pleasant village in the south of Palestine. And Lachish is a tell with some stones on it. Yet with the Bible, how great and how significant do those locations become? Now let me just turn to a marker so it'll be easier for us to see. That's better. Okay. So where is Lachish? In ancient time, Lachish is at the northwest corner of the kingdom of Judea. After the kingdom split, after Solomon, the days from Rechavam and on until the destruction, this is at the very west side of the kingdom. The coastal plain belonged, as we all remember, to the Philistines. And in modern days today, we call this area the Shpela, the lowlands, the foothills of Judea, not that far from Jerusalem. And as the invitation to the presentation said, the second in importance, the second largest city and the city where there's government. So let's take a drive to the lowlands, very green, round hills, a lot of vineyards. And then we see this strange looking hill. It's not round. It has sharp corners. It has all these buildings in it. We're getting close to Lachish. Again, notice this vineyard. Since we took the photos in the winter, we don't see foliage here, but all of these are vines. Now, the Nature Reserve and Park Authority is working very hard in the past few years to make Lachish more accessible, not only to wheelchairs, but people that have less imagination, less knowledge of the Bible, less knowledge of archaeology, that more and more audiences, people of all ranges and ages, can enjoy the site and see the story. So one of the things they do, they're building a visitor center at the foot of the hill. And this is on the outside wall. The visitor center is not open yet, wasn't open when we came to visit in the winter. But on the outside wall, you'd already get a lot of the information. So we see 6 major time periods. When the oldest is at the bottom, this is prehistory. And as you go up in the levels, you go forward.
Yeah, whatever you might call it.
Of course, this is very schematic. Lachish had more than 6 layers. Look, over here you have Neolithic and Chalcolithic and early bronze all put together. So it's just to make our visit more understandable. Our story today will focus at the very, very end of the late Bronze and the two Israelite periods, the early Israelite and the late Israelite. Our tour will focus on that. So if we walk through Lachish and see sites that have to do with the Canaanite period or Persian and beyond, we're just going to ignore them in order to stay focused, in order to have a narrative. And after we've finished looking at this wall, we go turn the corner of the building, and we see the Tell in front of us. Now, all of you have been in archaeological digs. You've seen this before, I'm sure, but just to make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about, okay? If a place is good for settlement, if it has a source of water, if it has fertile land, if it's close to a road, if it has all the D's, the 4 D's, the dine, the drive, the drink, and the defense, a settlement will be built. If that settlement is destroyed by some kind of catastrophe, whether it's earthquake, a war, or flood, okay, later on, a different generation will come to the same spot and build their buildings because the place has the 4 Ds, because it's good for settlement. They do not have the machinery, the heavy machinery we have today, the tractors, the bulldozers. They can't shovel away what remains from the first settlement that was there. So they build their settlement above. And this happens again and again and again. In every tell in Israel, it's a different amount of layers. The biggest tells are 30 different layers, like Bet She'an. And what we get is a trapezoid-shaped mound, the trapezoid-shaped mound. So after seeing that wall at the visitor center, and we go around the corner of the building, and we see Tell Lachish, and you see this trapezoid shape very, very clearly. Okay, now it's even sharper than this because I don't know if you can notice there's a thin line here. There's a very little difference in vegetation here. The Tell itself, the mound, ended here. So you had a much sharper trapezoid. This section is the Assyrian siege ramp, which was built later in order to make it less steep, in order to be able to climb up with their machines. And this shape is one of the greatest hints for archaeologists where to begin digging. You need to have 3 hints. One is the shape of the hill. Another, if you're lucky, is that the name remained, that the ancient Israelite Canaanite name stayed in the name of the Arab village that is there today. And this sign does not exist in the case of Lachish. And the third sign is if you see pottery on the ground. So here we have 2 out of the 3 signs. Why begin digging here at all? Okay. Now, as we make our way up, I'm going to go one back. Okay. Even one more. Okay. The main entrance to the city in biblical times was from here. First Israelite period is this level. Second Israelite period is already this level because the entrance goes up together with the mound. And we would have loved to go up this level on our tour, but when we were there, they were just fixing it for wheelchairs and we couldn't pass because they were working on the path. So we will have to go around here, around the siege ramp and the other side of the mound. Okay, so let's go forward. As we go up the bypassing way, we are remembering the times in the Bible that Lachish is mentioned. Let's move this aside, okay? Now the first time it's mentioned is the war of Joshua against the 5 Amorite kings. He comes to save the people of Giv'on, who has signed a treaty with the Israelites who just passed the Jordan. And these 5 kings attacked Giv'on, and Joshua comes and captures all the cities. And the Lord gave Lachish into the Israel's hands, and Joshua took it on the 2nd day, and the city and everyone in it put to the sword, Sam Lachirim. So it becomes part of the tribe of Judah, part of the territory of Judah. Okay, and as part of the territory of Judah, the first king of only Judah, not the United Kingdom, okay, Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, fortifies the western side of the kingdom. And all these cities are mentioned that they are fortified, and Lachish is the southern edge of this line. Now, we don't know exactly when he did it, because during the time of Rehoboam, Shishak, according to the Bible, the Pharaoh from Egypt comes up onto Judah and attacks it and reaches Jerusalem and actually loots the temple. So did Rehoboam fortify this line before this assault and the line did not hold? Or did he do it afterwards, after the horses have already escaped the stable? We are not sure about the timing. But definitely we have this line of cities, and Lachish is, once again, the most important of this line. And we continue down the dynasty, few generations from Rehoboam, 7 generations down, and we get to Amaziah. And Amaziah is one of those kings who were bad in the eyes of the Lord. We know that all the kings of Israel, like the northern kingdom, were bad in the eyes of the Lord. And we know that about half of those of Judea, and there was a rebellion against him in Jerusalem. So he flees from Jerusalem and goes to the second city in strength, hoping to find people that are loyal to him there and to build his strength again in order to go back to Jerusalem to gain power again. But unfortunately for him, the people of Lachish agreed with the people of Jerusalem and they killed him there. And our story will go 4 generations further down, and our main hero today is Hezekiah, and later on we will also go to Zedekiah, the very, very last king of Judea. Okay, so the main story: during the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, coming from here, where Iraq is today, on the Tigris River, and he built himself an empire which was absolutely the strongest and biggest to that time. He attacks and fortified cities of Judea and captured them. That's it. One sentence. There is no story of any battle. There is no record of the number of cities, the number of hostages, the number of dead, how many forces did Hezekiah put against him. Nothing. Silence. It is censored out. Okay? Kings do not like to write about their failures. Hezekiah denied paying taxes to Sennacherib, and therefore he was attacked. He was a rebel, and therefore he was attacked to shut down the rebellion. And the end, he had to pay. Okay? He had to pay 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. A talent is a measurement, it's a weight, very familiar in the ancient East, and the same word, the same term, the same weight is used all the way from Egypt to Mesopotamia. So he had to pay him probably much more than if he had paid his taxes on time. But what happened in the middle? What is the story of the battle? That is what we are trying to find out with the other sources, with the archaeology and the outer sources. And this is our question mark that we want to fill in as we tour. So as we said, we're going along the siege ramp, which archaeologists in the beginning didn't even recognize. It took them time to realize. The person who wrote the book of Hezekiah, the book of Kings, censored out the battle. But as happens many times in the Bible, hints find their way in other books. The censor didn't do a good enough work, did a good enough job to look for other contemporary sources in the Bible itself. So Isaiah is the main prophet of the time of Hezekiah. He is the main prophet during the time of Sennacherib's siege. And he speaks about Jerusalem. And he says about Jerusalem, Sennacherib, he will not enter the city, and he will not shoot an arrow, and he will not come before it with a shield or build a siege ramp against it. Now, in prophecy schools, you don't usually learn about arrows and siege ramps, okay? For him to use this terminology, it means that he encountered it somewhere before, that he saw it, that he heard about it from somewhere close. So here is, and why will he comfort the people of Jerusalem with these words? Because they are terrified, because they saw what happened to another city. They saw what happened to Lachish, and he is calming them down. What happened there is not going to happen here. So a hint did manage to find its way through. Now, as we go up, we will see a beautiful sign telling us that this is the solar shrine. Okay, in old maps of the digging, it's called the Sun Temple. My mother would say the Zel Bezach, okay, solar shrine, Sun Temple, okay. And this temple is from the Hellenistic period, which is much later than our story. And as you see, not in good condition and full of weeds, and therefore we are continuing in our tour and not spending more time here. And we're getting to the center of the tell, to the very top of the mound. And as we get there, we see as if there's another tell, another trapezoid, another fortification on the top, and this very strange line just in front of the wall. Let's go closer to this line. And we already see that it's seats, but it's not just regular chairs. These are thrones. Each chair is dedicated to a king of Judah, and the height of the back of the chair is according to the number of years that that king actually reigned. Now, I'm sitting on the seat, on the throne of Menashe, 51 years, the longest period. He is the son of Hezekiah, who is the hero of the story. So Hezekiah ruled a medium period of time. There are kings who ruled more, kings who ruled less. Menashe is considered bad in the eyes of God. Theologically, is a terrible king, okay? The Bible tells us again and again how bad he is. Hezekiah, on the other hand, is one of the favorite kings. He theologically, he went through reforms in the temple, in the ritual all around Israel. He was loyal to God the whole time. Historically, archaeologically, politically, the story is probably reverse, because the rebellion that Hezekiah led against Sennacherib brought destruction to the land. So many places were destroyed, so many people were killed, so many assets were taken by Assyria, that it took Menashe 51 years to rebuild the kingdom and put it back on track, to heal all the wounds from this rebellion. So two different perspectives of these kings. Okay, so this is again one of the things that the National Park Authority is building to make us understand, to make the stones speak to us better if we don't understand the archaeological language. Again, you see they're making the place also accessible for wheelchairs. And we're going to the very, very top of that wall we just saw behind the seats. And there's nothing there. There's this wall of stones, which is 2 layers high, okay? It is very hard to imagine the palace, the fortified palace that was there. But we can try to imagine the view that they saw from the windows of the palace, the view that they saw from the guard towers of the palace, because the same cities they saw then, we can still see today. So instead of just giving us signs saying that way is Jerusalem, that way is Hebron, that way is Beersheba, they give us this game as a wheel. We have to find the Hebrew letter, the Hebrew name of the place, of the city, and match it to where it's written in the ancient Hebrew. Let me tell you a secret. Although we have here the solution of ancient Hebrew, anyone can do it. You can count the number of letters. Beersheba has 2 words, so you can see 3 letters and 3 letters. You can manage to do it even if you don't know the ancient Hebrew script. So here we are looking at Hebron, okay, looking at Jerusalem as we see, and we see the same sights, the same view, the same neighbors as they saw almost 3,000 years ago. And the very, very few relics of the palace that was here just give us a hint about its size, okay? Each one of these stones is bigger than a square yard. It is enormous for biblical times. Again, I'm not comparing to Roman. That's not fair, okay? I'm comparing to Iron Age, and it's humongous, okay? So you have to use this one base of a pillar, and according to its width, imagine how high the pillar is, and then imagine what kind of hall, what kind of palace it stood in, okay? This is the hinge for a gate, okay? It's enormous. It's this big. So for the axe to go in, we can imagine how large the gates were in order to let a chariot go into the palace itself. And what view do we see today from the palace? Once again, the round green hills with all these vineyards, and just across from us, the next hill, among these trees, is the modern Moshav of Lachish. One of the things we love doing in Israel, after the names of the places have been preserved, at least partially, by the Arabs, after some of the places were re-recognized by Bible scholars and archaeologists, we love to give new settlements today the old biblical names, showing that we have returned to the land. We're not newcomers. We're not crusaders from Europe who are totally disconnected. We are returning to the land of the Bible. And this forest hill is, and the Moshav today is important to remember later on. This would be the camp of the Assyrian army when they come to siege around Lachish. We're getting off the inner Tell, the inner mound. This is where the palace was, again, with this a trapezoid above trapezoid. Look how high it was above the city. Look at the staircase that we're using today in order to go off. And we're continuing to the very western corner of the Tell, of the mound. And this is the one and only tree in the whole site. So if you are lost and you want to rendezvous with somebody, if you want to set a meeting at the tree, you'll both get to the same place. The Arabs here considered the trees to be enchanted, that it had ghosts and spirits living in it, most probably because they wanted children not to stay there for too long. Right next to the tree, as you will see next, is the well. And they wanted the kids to bring the water, fetch the water, and bring them home as quickly as possible. So they told the story about demons in the tree. What kind of tree is it? It's Shezaf in Hebrew, the thorn of Christ, Spina Christi. And you can see that the branches are very, very, very thorny. And according to the Christian faith, this is the branches, this tree is what was used for the crown of thorns of Jesus. The fruit of this, it's as big as a cherry, more or less. It begins green, it ripens to yellow, and then finally it's red. It looks like a tiny apple. It has a very big stone inside, like a cherry. So there's hardly any flesh, and it tastes like a tasteless apple. Okay, it's edible. If you're totally starving and you have nothing else to eat, go ahead. You'll have to have a gazillion of them in order to be satisfied. There's not much there. Okay, and since we came in the winter, we were very, very lucky, right next to the tree, to find these mandrakes, dudaim in Hebrew. Enormous leaves, very, very small purple flower, and a very, very, very strong, complicated root. just a week before we went on this tour, Julia and I went to volunteer at Zichron Yaakov on a hillside where today there's nature and there are many, many wildflowers. And they're going to build a new neighborhood there. And there was this whole operation of taking the bulbs of the wildflowers out of the ground in order to replant them after they finish building the neighborhood in the gardens around the buildings and also in other places in Israel. So we took anemones and cyclamen and all kinds, and everything was quite easy and quite simple until we reached the mandrake. 3 of us, Julia and I and another mutual friend, worked for a half an hour trying to take one mandrake out, and we failed. It was stronger than us, okay? Terrible, okay? And look at it, it also looks like 2 people are hugging. And because it looks like 2 people are hugging, it is considered to be, if you have some kind of potion made from this root, for fertility. For barren women, it's supposed to be very good. But those barren women should not do what Julia and I tried to do. They should not pick it out. They should happen to encounter one that a dog or a pig or some force took out of the ground without them helping. Now, the biblical story tells us about Reuven, the oldest son of Leah, who finds a mandrake plant in the field, and he brings it to his mother, and Rachel buys the mandrake in return for Leah having a few more nights with Jacob. Now, in the case of Leah, although she didn't have the mandrakes, they helped. She had more sons. And Rachel, it took some time, a few more chapters until Yosef is finally born. And I couldn't help myself. I had to bring some squeaking mandrakes from Harry Potter as well because they're so vivid. So Julia is demonstrating going down to the well, which is 44 meters deep. I hope you're all okay with metric. Let's say it's almost 50 yards deep. The well is Canaanite. Prior to our period of interest, it is not very well defended. It is outside what were the walls of the city. We can just imagine that if it was the second most important city in Judea, it must have had a water system similar to the one in Gezer, in Beersheba, in Chatzor, in Megiddo, in Jerusalem, okay? Keyword in archaeology, that water system has not been found yet. Now, remind me in 10, 20 years to have another presentation and show you, hopefully, the water system. So once again, not our period. We're not going to talk about it much more. Not far away from that Canaanite well, a Canaanite temple was found, a very unique temple, the first in its exact period from Israel. Look at the size of the vessels. That is enormous. And decorated pottery and gold reliefs and little statues of the god Baal, the Canaanite head of gods, and more artifacts. But once again, the temple itself is recovered. We cannot see anything in situ, and not our period of interest. So we are leaving it and finally getting really close to our story. So we're now on the eastern side of the Tell, and we're looking again towards the palace. And it's very hard to imagine that there were walls around it with towers and the palace itself. And all this empty area was where the regular people lived, the neighborhood, okay? So the park authority made up this sign with these 2 peepholes for children and for adults. And when you put your eye really, really close to this peephole, what you see is this, okay? Through this glass, over the scenery that you see, this is the same picture that you see here. You actually see the palace itself, and then they help us imagine what it looked like. Okay, so this is the palace, the Acropolis, the inner fortification of the city, and the neighborhood, which is over here, where the regular people lived, normal size houses. And as we go towards the very end, the eastern side, we see signs of three shapes. Remember, the Bible, the history, the archaeology, the three sources. Whenever you see a sign shaped as a book, you know what you have inside is a quote from the Bible, mostly from the Book of Kings. Whenever you see a hexagon like this, that is an Assyrian source. The Assyrian writing, the Assyrian report about what happened in Lachish. Whenever you see just a flat sign, is the findings, what the archaeologists found, what we see in the site. Okay? The battle itself, okay? The forces of Sennacherib coming from the north, they don't just come across the desert. They could not have enough supply of water. They have to come all the way up to the border between Turkey and Syria of today. And sorry, just a second. And come down to Israel from the north. Mitzafon tipatach hara, evil comes from the north. And we see battles that they had along the way, along the coast, Philistine sites, Israelite sites, and finally they reach Lachish and they set their headquarters here. And from Lachish, they go out and capture all the other cities of Judea, including the attempt to capture Jerusalem. Right? Most of our information comes from this amazing wall relief that was found in the palace of Nineveh, Iraq of today, the capital of Sennacherib. And in his throne room, the most important room of his palace, where the center of his power, what he decided to depict there is the battle of Lachish. More than any battle, and he fought a lot in many countries. He couldn't just come here from Assyria without resistance along the way. He had many battles. The Battle of Lachish was the fiercest, the one that he wanted to praise about. And these tablets were taken from Iraq and brought to the British Museum. This is a photo from the British Museum. The ancient artists, 2,700 years ago, probably stood more or less where the visitor center is today. That is the angle that he saw the tell, the mound. If you remember, we saw in the very beginning, the siege ramp was on the right-hand side. The gate was more on the left, okay? It's so accurate. It's so precise that I have to believe, you don't have to agree with me, that the artist was actually there, that he followed the army, like a reporter today, like a military journalist. And he made his sketches already there. And then he returned to Nineveh and copied what he wanted onto the wall. It is so accurate that it cannot be that somebody else told him. It is, you had to see it yourself. So all these sculptures that we see all around that help us imagine are all taken from this wall relief from the throne room of Nineveh. So we begin reading the story from left to right, okay? The army is approaching the city, and we have all kinds of weapons, and the soldiers are organized by range. The furthest are the slingers, and you see the slingshots. Some of them have piles of ammunition at their feet, okay? Sometimes they walk in pairs, sometimes they walk singular. Some have shoes, some are barefoot. Further, just in front of the slingers are the archers. Their range is a little shorter, okay? And they are beginning to walk. Now look at the terrain around. You see that the terrain is quite rocky. You see all these little pebbles around in the background, okay? That's not the scenery in Assyria. That's not the scenery in Mesopotamia along the Tigris, where it's all flat and it's all alluvium and sand. Okay, and you had to be there in order to anybody who dug in Israel knows how many rocks we have everywhere. Now look at the vegetation around. We have olive trees, and we have grapes, vines, and we have fig trees. I'll walk around the lowlands today, and that's what you will see. Okay, all three of these are from the 7 species that the land is blessed. Okay, we're continuing with the army. Okay, and the closest to the city itself, those with the shortest range, are the people holding the spears. Because they are the closest, they also have shields, most of them with round shields. And the very, very first in the first line has a body-sized shield. And he's the first to be hurt, so he actually walks. He can hardly see where he's going. He can hardly use the spear because he's holding this very, very, very heavy and big shield. You see that the defenders of the city, here we already see the walls of the city. The defenders are already fighting back. See, this shield already has 3 arrows stuck in it. So the shield has done its job very well. And here at the right corner, we can already see the beginning of the siege ramp. The ramp that will enable the machines to go all the way up and break the walls of the city. Okay, so if you did not understand everything from the relief, once again, you see the olives, the grapes, and the figs over here, the slingers at the back, then the archers, and then the spearmen. Beginning of the ramp going up, and here are the walls and the gates of the city. And let's go closer to the walls and the gate. You notice that the main wall is at the back, and projects out from it is the area of the gate. And the gate has a tower that's part of it is already broken. We can presume that the tower was symmetrical, and it had, like, there's a post here on the right, there was also a post here on the left, and that's already broken. And the defenders are using all kinds of weapons. They're throwing stones. All these stones that you see here are being thrown off the wall by the defenders, and they're also throwing torches because, as we said, this is the ramp, and the machines, okay, with the battering ram, are climbing up, and they're made out of wood. And what the defenders are trying to do is burn these machines. Now, the attackers, the Assyrians, being the strongest, most sophisticated army of the world at that time, okay, obviously later the Roman army would be stronger, the Nazi, the American army today, obviously, but for their time, they are the strongest massive army in history. They know that defenders are going to try to burn their machines. So there's one person in this, let's call it a tank, okay? So there's a driver and there's the shooter, and one person whose job is to keep pouring water on the battering ram, okay? This is a big ladle, it's a big spoon, and he's pouring water on the machine. From the gate, we can already see people coming out. They are not as masculine, they're not as big, okay? You see families, you see men and women and children. Their bodies are much smaller. These are the people who are surrendering. These are the prisoners of war coming out of the gates of the city. Some of them are already being tormented, okay, and shown as psychological warfare, showing them killed on these spears. Obviously, those who are killed are also totally naked. Very, very popular in the ancient world to show your enemy that you've defeated. He lost everything to the point that he actually lost the shirt that he's wearing. Okay, so people who are defeated are very often presented as being totally naked. Okay, so taking from that relief, we stand on the top of the tell. We cannot see anything but piles of stone, but here they are. These are the towers of the defenders. They are throwing stones, some of them with slings, some of them are just throwing stones to the attackers, some archers, and here are the attackers with their machine, the shooters from the back, you have the driver, and you have the person with the ladle pouring water to make sure that the battering ram will not burn. And this is the ramp that was built. And around the ramp, the archaeologists found tons, dozens of stones and of arrowheads, both Israelites and Assyrian. We can actually feel the battle that was here up to the point that the Assyrians managed to break the wall and go in and burn the city all to the ground. And the people of Israel, the people of Judea, the people of Lachish were defeated. So we see more and more of them coming out of the gate. And they are taking their animals with them. We see the months of siege. Okay, look how starving this animal is. We can see the ribs. Okay, and people are taking the little of possessions that they can. The army is looting the expensive possessions, maybe from a temple that was here, some kind of shrine, despite the fact that Hezekiah did not allow ritual outside of Jerusalem. Maybe artifacts were left somewhere. These are taken by the army. Look at these like candlesticks. Okay, this is not something that from somebody's personal house, and this is maybe from the palace. Okay, so they are looting. And where are they all going? They're going to the headquarters, which is on the next hill, where Sennacherib himself is standing and waiting for him, sitting on his throne and waiting. And once again, people are tormented here and tortured. And once again, the Parks Authority is trying to make us visualize, okay? We said this is the lower level of Israelite 1, ending in the time of Sennacherib. This is the upper level, the Israelite 2, which we will reach shortly. So these are the hostages coming out, okay, complete families, and they are reaching Sennacherib himself, the king. And how do we know? Because the artist was so kind to us, and he actually wrote it, okay? This is the inscription here. I just need to move your faces so I can read it. Sennacherib, the king of the world, king of Assyria, set up a throne, and the booty of Lachish passed before him. Perfect. Perfect. Archaeologists cannot ask for more. The story with the inscription in a nutshell, telling us absolutely everything. Now, what we're going to see is 30 seconds of a film. 30 seconds. Now I'm going to stop share for a second in order to share my sound as well. And then I'm going to come back to it. So just 1 second, please. If anybody has questions or remarks during this. Okay, and now I need to optimize it for video and share. Okay, and we need to get to the same slide. Okay. What we're going to see here is a person that sort of looks like an Indiana Jones. He is my uncle, Uncle Maynard, my father's brother, who is also a professor at York University. He's an Assyriologist. He is a professor of the ancient East, and I took him to Lachish, and he actually stood and read this inscription. Okay, turn your volume up as far as you can, because this was with my camera.
Ulu Lakisu, that's Lachish. Etik, I catch.
There it is. Okay, I just love this section. He's actually reading this cuneiform, this Assyrian inscription. He knows it by heart. But he was very excited to see it. Now, let's compare this relief from the palace to what we know from our archaeological diggings, and we see that there was an inner wall and an outer wall, and the gate was projecting out exactly as we saw in the relief, and the ramp was built on this side. Okay. Now, the grapes Okay, I mentioned them again and again. Look at the vineyards today. They are considered the best brand in Israel. Invei Tali Moshav Lachish Kol Einav Zahav is a jingle that we sing every summer. Kol Einav Zahav, every grape is like gold. Okay, imagine this. Okay, the conditions, the soil, the temperature, the humidity, the range of the rain around the year, they are perfect for grapevines. And that hasn't changed. The geography hasn't changed from 2,700 years ago till today. In modern times, it is still the main agricultural incoming branch we have. Going back to the story. So the Bible we already read this before, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. But Sennacherib also tells us the story. And this is the hexagon that we saw before. In 3 different hexagons that are identical in their content, but they were spread around the world. Sennacherib did not have WhatsApp, did not have the social media that we had today. He had to tell around his kingdom, around his empire, that people that rebelled against him were punished badly. He had to share this news. So he makes several of these hexagons, and on them on cuneiform, he tells the story. So 3 of them were found. 1 of them is in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and he tells us about 30 talents of gold. Okay, they agree, 30 talents of gold. And he tells us about 800 talents of silver. Who's telling the truth? Is Sennacherib exaggerating his victory? Or is Hezekiah minimizing his defeat? Or is the truth somewhere in the middle? We're not sure. Okay? You can believe whichever. And see all the other treasures, okay, that he brought, as well as his daughters and his harem and his male and female musicians. It is total destruction of the land, something that will take decades to fix later on. And then he attempts to go to Jerusalem, and he doesn't manage to go in. And the Bible doesn't tell us anything about it except for the hint in Isaiah. Don't worry, Jerusalem, it will not happen to you. But the hexagon tells us that he brought the siege engines, and he led off 150 people, and he ruined 46 of his fortified city, and himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. Now, he set a siege on Jerusalem, but he never succeeded. So he doesn't tell us that he did not succeed. He just leaves it at that. He doesn't finish the story. Okay, what really happened there? Probably there was a plague. We hear it from different sources. We have hints. Probably there was a plague, and his army escaped back to Assyria. Now, since we're on a virtual tour, we will fly to Jerusalem very, very shortly. Okay, Temple Mount, City of David. This was the size of the city when Hezekiah became king. This narrow city on the east. Okay, then just before he became king, the kingdom of Israel was captured by a previous Assyrian king, by Sargon, and many refugees came from Israel down to Judea and lived here outside the city of Jerusalem. Now, when Hezekiah rebels, and he knows that the Assyrian army is going to come, and he has a few months, maybe even a year to prepare, because they didn't fly over, and they had to walk the whole way from Iraq to Israel around, okay, not crossing the desert. So he had time to prepare. So he builds a wall around this new neighborhood to protect these people. And this is the broad wall that was found in Jerusalem. Now, he doesn't have time for city planning. He doesn't have time for compensation. People who lived where the wall should be were told, move aside, we're building a wall. Okay, so we actually see the houses being torn down in order to build a wall. again, another phrase in Isaiah. Will not go deeply into that. And he moves the water source, which used to be here, to the other side of the mountain, making sure that it's well inside the walls, providing water to the old residents of the city and the new residents of the city together. These two projects complete each other, this broad wall and the tunnel. And of course, I'm sure you all know the Hezekiah inscription telling us how happy people were when the tunnel was finished and the water started streaming from this side to the pool on the other side. Okay, this project saved Judea because Sennacherib could not get into Jerusalem. The people still had water, they could still live. And Judea stayed for another 120 years, very significant 120 years. The 120 years that basically saved monotheism, saved Judaism as we know it today. Now, going back to Lachish, what other preparations did Hezekiah do? He made sure that all the cities in Judea, before Sennacherib's army comes, have enough food, have enough provisions, olive oil, wine, wheat, etc. So he made sure that every city, every town has a royal storage with the emergency supplies, and that those supplies are stamped with a royal seal. There are 4 kinds of royal seals, each one naming a different city. Hebron, which we can obviously recognize, Socho, Zif, the 2 other places that we can recognize, and Mamshat, which we are not sure exactly where it is. Perhaps maybe it's Memshelet, maybe it's government, maybe it's meant to Jerusalem. We don't know. On each one of these seals, there are 4 Hebrew letters, La Melech, okay, La Melech, belonging to the king. And such handles were found all around Judea. This is what a jar would look like complete. We're not sure exactly whether 1 handle or all 4 or sometimes 2 or 3. So the number of handles that we found with the seal doesn't tell us exactly the number of jars, but it's a big number. Okay? Look over here. These are all the places in Israel, and mostly in Judea, as you see. Okay, very few in northern Israel, mostly in Judea, where these jars or handles were found. And look at the numbers. Okay, those of you who cannot read the Hebrew. The first one is Lachish, 415. Now this list is old. Since then, there were found a few more. Second is Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, 281. More were found since this list was made. Ramat Rachel is southern Jerusalem, another administrative center of the kingdom of Judea and all the other places. So this is the major point. Again, he was preparing for war. He was preparing for siege. Obviously not prepared enough. Why are these handles so important? Because we know exactly when they were made and what for. And in Lachish, they appear, all these 415, in a layer of destruction, in a thick layer of ash. We know for sure that layer is from the year 701 BC. So wherever we go in Israel for archaeological excavations and we find a handle like this, La Melech, we know that is from 701. And then we can date the layer above and the layer below. So this is a key sign in archaeology. And now, after the city was destroyed by Sennacherib, it was rebuilt again. Again, an important city, not as grand as it was before, but still for the few generations, for the few kings left until the end of the kingdom of Judea, it is a major city, fortified with a wall and with a gate projecting, and actually a double gate with a plaza. Okay, there's an inner gate, a plaza, an outer gate leading to the ramp going down. So once again, Julie is demonstrating the plaza here. This is looking from outside into the outer gate. And I just wrote in the Concordancia quotes about gate, and this is just a partial list of how important the gate was. It was a place of judgment. It was a place of government. It was a focal place of culture, of social life, of meeting each other, okay? Things happened at the gate. The elders sat at the gate. All the men who went out through the gate, sitting on their thrones by the gate. And as I said, this is a partial list, how important the gate is in an ancient city. The inner gate, okay, this is the plaza, the outer gate is here. The inner gate, like in many other sites in Israel, has 3 chambers in each side. Those of you know from Gezel, from Megiddo, from Chatzor, etc., etc. This is the fashion, this is the architecture of that time. And each chamber is used for something else. As I said, it could be where the garrison sat, where a judge sat, where there was the money exchange, etc. Notice this chamber here. It has a division inside. We also see this division over here. Let's go closer to this chamber. By the way, Julia is now standing at this point when I took this picture. Okay, we go closer to this chamber and we see this division. And what the archaeologists found on the division itself and behind it were these surprises. They saw 2 altars with their horns deliberately chopped down, not broken, but taken off with an axe and a very sharp cut. And behind the altars, the last thing that you would imagine to find, a toilet seat. And some of you might recognize this from the city of David. A handful of these were found around Judea and Israel. What is a toilet seat doing there? What is the altar doing there? Let's start with that, okay? So there was probably at least 1, if not more, temples in Lachish before the time of Hezekiah. Micha, who is another prophet of the same time of Hezekiah and Isaiah, tells us that he talks to Lachish. He talks about the destruction that is about to happen to Lachish. He prophesies and he says to Lachish, you are where the sin of the daughters of Zion began. Okay? You are a sinful city. Why are you a sinful city? You have all kinds of rituals. You have all kinds of temples that are not supposed to be there. But what does Hezekiah do about it? Okay, Hezekiah removes all the temples and high places and cuts down the Asherah poles. The Asherah poles are the horns of this altar. But the archaeologist Sal Gano, who found this temple, this gate temple, and found the toilet, he tells us, one of the earliest Zooms of the beginning of Corona was with him. He tells us he went home that night and he couldn't fall asleep. He turns over and over and over. How can you explain a toilet in a temple? And finally, he goes back to the book of Kings, to the northern kingdom, to the kingdom of Israel, where the bad house of Omri and Achab is finally pushed down by Yehu, who was chosen by God to finish that dynasty. And Yehu also burns and destroys the temples of the Baal, and to make sure that they're not used again, and he puts latrines in the temples. So there is a precedent. There is a case in the Bible that we know that we turn the temple of the Baal into a public toilet. In the case here of Lachish, the toilet was never used. It was pristine. It was brand new with the nylon on it. Okay, they checked below. They didn't find anything, as opposed to other toilets that were found that we know what people ate and what came out the other side. This case, it was brand new. It was just symbolic, okay, making sure that nobody's going to turn it into a temple again. So that's a nice finding, something to talk about. The most important finding of the gate are the letters, the ostraca, okay? Ostrakon is a word in Greek that means a shard of pottery, a broken piece of pottery. In archaeology, we use this word mostly when the ostrakon has writing on it. So not every shard is an ostrakon, although that's what the ancient Greeks meant. We use it when there's writing on it. 21 such letters were found. Most of them are correspondent between one commander and the other. There's an argument about archaeologists whether these letters were sent from another post to Lachish, or whether the commander of Lachish wrote them to somewhere else and made sure to save copies. Think about it. At that time, finding ink and writing was so scarce, was so random. To think that somebody will write a copy of his own letter, I find it hard to believe. I don't think they had the same office ideas that we have today of filing, but there are archaeologists that believe that these are copies. And the amazing thing is how many similarities, how many hints that we can find, cross-references between this historical documents found by archaeologists, but the minute they have writing on it, they become history, not only archaeology, and our written source, the Bible. For instance, letter number 3, the letters are not numbered by the chronology of writing them. They're numbered by the chronology of finding them and documenting them by science. And this letter, and we're not going to read everything that's written here, but it mentions a commander named Konya, the son of Elnatan. And it mentions that this person has gone down to Egypt. And we are speaking now of the very, very end of the kingdom of Judea. It's the time of King Zedekiah. The kingdom, the rival kingdom, the empire is Babylon. And the prophet is Jeremiah. And the prophet Jeremiah tells us of King Joachim, one before Zedekiah, and he sent a person named Elnatan. Same person, same name. And he sends him to Egypt. So it's not identical, but we have similar hints. Letter, I can't see the number, letter number 6, okay, tells us that there's demoralization in the army. Somebody is telling the people things that are causing the soldiers to weaken their hands, okay? How amazing is it that from the same period, the prophet Jeremiah is being, he's making the army angry because his things are weakening the hands of the soldier. And he's actually ordered to be killed. How angry they are because of the demoralization. 2 different sources, the Bible and a document that was written at the same time using the same term. For me, that is exciting. Letter number 9 mentions a person named Shalmaiah. And again in Jeremiah, a person named Shalmaiah is mentioned, and Gedaliah ben Pashhur is mentioned. These 2 people we have found, we archaeologists in Jerusalem found their seals. Okay, everything comes together. And of course, the most exciting letter is letter number 4, the most famous of the letters. This is one of the very, very last letters. City after city, settlement after settlement are surrendering and are being captured by the Assyrian army. Now, all these different settlements signaled to each other at night by torches. Okay, they didn't have the social network that we have today. They didn't have the phones. As long as the torches were on at night, you know that the city was still holding on. Now, Jeremiah tells us at a certain point that Lachish and Azekah are still standing. Okay, all the other cities fell, and that we're still holding out, Lachish and Azekah. Again, we go to the same map of the fortifications of Rechavam. This letter number 4 was written after Jeremiah wrote this phrase, because whoever it was, the person, cannot see Hezekiah anymore. The torches of Hezekiah have been blown out, have been captured by the Assyrian army. Let it be known that we are watching for the fire signals of Lachish. We can still see you. We know that you are alive, but you should know that we cannot see Hezekiah. So the end is coming close. Not only the end of Lachish, the end of the kingdom of Judea, because Nebuchadnezzar, Nabucco, the king of Babylon, once again goes from where Iraq is today, from the Euphrates and the Tigris, all around through Syria, Turkey, and Lebanon, and captures Judah. And we found around the gates the arrowheads, this time Babylonian, not Assyrian. And people from Israel, the temple was destroyed. The people go to the exile, the first exile, the Babylonian exile, where they probably saw around them temples that were guarded by these limasu, these half-person, half-lion, sort of sphinx creatures. So these limasu are decorating the entrance to the movie at the visitor center, back down at the foot of the Tell, which we could not enter yet. We will tell you the next time that that we get there. And there it is.
Sharona, toda rabba. Thank you so much for the presentation. Well, I was sure that you will make a great one, and it was wonderful indeed. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I remember myself posing at all these places, but you did add so much more to what I saw. So thank you so much. And even though it was longer than usual, but I'm sure people really enjoyed it. Now we have a few questions on chat, so I don't think you need me to read it. I think you can read it for yourself. Am I right? Okay, so go for it.
Were the walls of some height that we saw in modern times, or did they last from ancient times? No, the walls did not last. You cannot see walls around the city today. Around the Tell, it was level to the ground. So we can just imagine how high the walls were comparing to other Israelite sites, comparing to other Iron Age mounds. Mandrakes look like kale or chard. I'm not sure what those plants are. Are the leaves edible? No, not as far as I know. Not as far as I know. I also know that after the flower becomes a fruit, the fruit is very poisonous, actually. So I don't think so. About the crown of thorns, look, we don't really know what the crown of thorns of Jesus was made of. Okay, the New Testament doesn't tell us. The thorniest flexible thorn that we have in Israel is this. This is totally a matter of tradition. And I know you don't argue with tradition, but at the same time, you can have three traditions telling us the same thing. I mean, for instance, the Mount of Beatitudes.
Yeah, I would just mention that the plant which is mentioned here, euphorbia, it's original from Madagascar. So, and later it was taken by humans to the other parts of the world. So I don't think in the time of Yeshua, they could have used a plant from Madagascar. So I would guess that this is the wrong one. Kale, Sharona, is a sort of a lettuce, which is supposed to be a superfood. And yeah, you cannot eat the mandrake leaves.
Yeah.
No way.
I don't think so. Yeah, mandrakes all around, all over Europe and all through history had some kind of magical properties. Okay? Helping a barren woman to have children, that's definitely magic. So that's one, and I'm not surprised that it's in the book of Harry Potter. Okay, it's along the same line. The round stones are man-made, of course, and they're for the slingers, but there were also just stones everywhere. Walk around Israel, walk around the lowlands. It's all made out of stone. Thank you for the compliment. Question: how many people lived at Lachish at its peak? Hard to know. The palace is enormous, but probably did not have as many people in it living. It was more spacious. Also, we can presume we found so many handles that there were many storage places that were not excavated yet. There were also public areas. There were areas for those temples that Hezekiah had to tear down. So I'm not sure how much of the Tell was actually settled by regular people that we know had about 6 or 7 people to a house. So I don't want to give a number. My excuse will be I'm a tour guide, not an archaeologist. Okay, I don't want to give a number. I would guess a few thousands, very, very low few thousands. Where were the wall and the tunnel in Jerusalem that saved Judea? The tunnel is underneath the city of David. It is known as the Hezekiah tunnel. It's also known as the Shiloach or the Gihon tunnel, and it's as walkable today. It's 530 meters in the dark. It takes an hour. Water knee high. Wonderful experience in the summer, not for claustrophobic people, and that's underneath the city of David. The broad wall goes in the what we call today the Western Hill. It is the Jewish quarter of today, and there is a section at the Jewish quarter just north of the corridor when we could see a very big portion of it. And archaeologists knows where it continued. It has here and there more sections that were found, and we can draw the line of where it was, although not 100% of it was excavated. We can draw the line of where it was according to the records of Josephus.
When were they built?
Years later.
When were they built? When were they built?
In the year preparing for the siege. From the moment that Hezekiah decided that he's revolting, that he's not paying the annual tax, he knows punishment will come, and he begins to prepare. So he knows it will take the Assyrian army a while to go all the way to the top of the Euphrates and then come down. So it's 702, 703. This is what we're talking about, BC. That's when they were built. Okay. Now, why am I saying that they saved Judea? Because the people of Israel, the 10 tribes who were captured by the Assyrians 20 years before the story of Sennacherib and Hezekiah, they scattered, they disappeared, they dissolved. We don't know. We have guesses. Maybe here there's the tribe of Dan, and here's the tribe of Menashe, but we don't know exactly where they are. They did not keep their Judaism. The extra 120 years after Hezekiah, after his reforms, and then another king even strengthened those reforms, Yoshiyahu even strengthened those reforms, made monotheism, the roots finally became strong enough. And despite the fact that the people of Judea went to Babylon, they kept their Judaism. It also helped that 50 years later, they were allowed by Cyrus, by the Persian king, to come back. Okay, but it's those extra 120 years that made monotheism strong enough to hold in exile. I have a photo of Lachish letter number 2 from the British Museum. Interesting. Do you know what it says?
Can you see the photo? I have no idea what it says.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought
I can see it. Okay,
I thought you might know what it says.
No,
Okay, I
we
need
have
my
to
uncle
send it.
for that.
Yeah, we need the uncle here. Okay.
And also, there's also, this says, oh, excuse me. This says some weights from Lachish.
From Lachish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it says the weights, but
Yeah. They actually, some of them actually have a word on them, inscribed on them, saying what the weight is. Like we have today, like a pound or a kilo, and it's written on it what it is. And some of these weights are on exhibit in the Israel Museum, and they say shekel and they say beka, which is a half of the shekel. And one of them actually says on it the word pim, which by finding that weight, it helped decipher a biblical phrase that wasn't understood till today. There's a biblical phrase about the Philistines fixing the chariots and the rakes of the Israelites, and how much it costs to fix a rake or a plow. And the word pim was there, and nobody understood what pim is. And until they found those weights in Lachish that have the word pim in ancient Hebrew inscribed on, and they suddenly understood that pim is a measurement, and that was the measurement in metal that somebody had to pay in order for the Philistines to fix the plow.
Yeah, the sign does say inscribed in heretic or Hebrew, donating multiples or fractions of the shekel.
Exactly. So the pim is like 2/3 of a shekel or something like that.
Well, I would have looked more closely if I had heard your talk before we went. The next time I go, I'll really investigate.
There's
Thank
a
you.
question here about hieroglyphs. Okay, what I showed you is not hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs are from Egypt. What I showed you from Assyria is, I'm not pronouncing it correctly. No, I'm not. I call it cuneiform, but I know I'm not pronouncing it correctly. My mother keeps correcting me, and somehow it doesn't go into my mind. Anyway, hieroglyphs you learn if you study Egyptology, and the cuneiform you go if you study with my professor Megman at the University of York.
It's cuneiform.
Cuneiform. Thank you.
Okay, Sharona.
That's it.
Sharona, go ahead. I needed to take another sip of water because I see that we have more people leaving us, which is totally fine. I mean, we're way past an hour. At the same time, we still have questions, and Sharona is so kind to answer. So we'll just want to remind that the day after tomorrow, we will be walking in Jerusalem in a very special week of the Passion, and we will be talking about crucifixion and resurrection and what happened ever since every year for Easter. And next week we have two very different and I believe very interesting topics, very important actually topics. One Tuesday we have a presentation by Lauren about the legal rights of the Jewish people for this land. So we will be talking about legal stuff and also our roots and connections to the land of Israel. And then Thursday, we will be going to Qumran, and we will be talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And as you probably know, these are the most ancient biblical texts, actual texts from the Old Testament. And so the place is amazing, and the texts are amazing. And they are stored in the Israel Museum in the shrine of the book. And so we'll be shortly visiting this exhibit as well. So Qumran, Dead Sea Scrolls, amazing story, ancient biblical text, and our legal rights. This is next week. What can be better? So Sharona, thank you so much. And
I'd like to answer two short questions that I see here. Okay, the
Sure.
4 Ds, the elementary necessities for settlement. You have to have a source of water, you have to have food, you have to have defense, and hopefully you have a closeness to either a port or a road, because you are growing 1 or 2 or 3 kinds of agriculture, and you need to exchange in order to get what you don't have. So the 4 Ds are taking these necessities and raping the English language, okay? It's drink, dine, drive, and defend. Okay? So these 4 Ds are in Hebrew we call them the 5 mems, okay? Because it's ma'im, mazon, magen, and don't remember at the moment. Okay, so Easy way to remember what are the four elements. Without them, you would not have an ancient Tell. When was Lachish last inhabited? On the Tell itself, Hellenistic period. We saw the solar shrine or the sun temple. That's from the Hellenistic period. From Roman period and on, Lachish is not inhabited. The Arab village that was close to the place was not on the mound itself, but where the Moshav Lachish is today. And are excavated continuing? Yes, maybe not every year, but for instance, the toilet was found 2 years ago, just lately, and we are far from excavating 100% of the Tell. The Canaanite temple was found quite recently as well, in the last 5 years. So every time there's a little bit more and a little bit more. It's not major excavations like the Beit Shemesh you saw in one of your previous wonderful presentations. Every time another locus. I think I'm more or less, yes, and I totally agree that the artist's description of the battle is an amazing, amazing document. I mean, you could study a whole semester just that description, and it gives us so much information and accurate information. And I think that's it. I think I covered the questions.
Sharona, thank you so much for your return performance. I think you certainly made a fantastic mixture of Bible history and archaeology. The soup was very tasty. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think so too. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're still here, pay as you wish is our slogan. So donations are appreciated, and your continued presence is appreciated as well, because we really need it. And well, I think if we have any further questions, so now you're welcome to unmute yourself. And otherwise, that's it. And Sharona can go to bed. And toda raba, nadaber.
Release the cat.
Yeah, shmooze time. Yeah. You can, exactly. You can welcome kids back home and Lila the cat. And yeah, we are ready for the smooth session.
Yes.
Bye.
Laila Tov. Thank you,
Tודה
Sharona.
רבה, שרונה. נדבר.
Laila Tov.
לילה טוב.
Wow, that was great.
Okay. Yeah, wasn't it amazing? I mean, she is great. She is really, like, I really love the presentation. This is the first time I see it, and yeah,
Wow.
I'm very pleased.
You did good.
Yeah, she did good. Okay, it's good to have
Yeah.
a friend.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
What else?
You ready to go to sleep?
Yeah, actually, me too. Yeah, I was working for hours on my presentation the day after tomorrow. It will be very different. It will be more sort of updated, because it really, I went to Jerusalem this Saturday for the ceremony, which is like amazing, crazy, weird, whatever you want to tell about it. And you cannot, the whole thing takes place in the church, in this great church of the Holy Sepulchre, and you cannot get in. I mean, you have to be invited, you have to have tickets, even, and like normally there are much more people. Now it's restricted because of the virus, but even then, like, there was no chance of getting tickets, so I was outside. But just to see people like waiting for the fire to come out, well, you will see it the day after tomorrow. It is amazing. And it's so amazing to think that it actually takes place here and now, modern days Israel, you know, the Jewish state of Israel, all that. And this is the same ceremony which takes place every year for the last at least 1,000 years, and staying is true today, you know. So we will be talking about the Palm Sunday and the divine light and other things, which, you know, I guess you know what Palm Sunday is. Like, you are familiar with the term, right? The Palm Sunday, yeah. Okay, so Palm Sunday is something which the Catholics and the Orthodox accept, but the divine light is something which is unique to the Orthodox. So I don't think you know what the divine light is. Am I right? The divine light? No. All right.
Right.
So you will. Okay. So you will know in about 48 hours, and this is fascinating. So yeah, and then next week it's Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is another legend, you know. another Indiana Jones story, which is a true one.
Yeah.
And then, and then in the end of the month, Yossi Leshem, unfortunately, he is not available to make a presentation. No, he will probably make a presentation next month, but he said that he's too busy this month, and I didn't want to put too much pressure on him, so not to lose him for forever. So I have May 26th available, so I will use it for UAE part 2. Okay, so we will be, part 2. So we will be going to Abu Dhabi and to the flower park and butterfly park and the global village, which is not a village, and other places. So yeah, something I'm looking forward to. Steve, I thought, okay, I will. Sure.
Very good. Very
so
good.
I am excited. I hope you are excited, and see you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Laila Tov, Julia.
Laila Tov, Laila Tov.
Okay.
Laila Tov.
All right. We are now in schmooze mode for all folks who want to hang around, and we have a good crowd here today.
We have a shorter schmooze time today.